Hey, everybody. I'm Laura Beth Wenger. Welcome back to Thoughts and Feelings. And I am very happy to say we have a guest today, so I don't have to come up with so many things to say. This is my good friend and colleague, Jennifer Snowdon, and many of you already know her and follow her. But if you don't, I hope you will. And I hope you really enjoy what she has to say today. So, Jennifer and I have known each other for several years, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself in a minute. But what I really want you to know is that today we're going to be talking about the link between breathing, mental health, and physical health. And Jennifer is the person I know that really brings that all together. So, Jennifer, welcome, hello, and can you just share a little bit about what you do and maybe why you do it?
Hmm. Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me today.
Mm,
So I'm a yoga teacher and I'm an integrated breathing therapist, and I have studied lots of different breathing techniques. Um, and I'm studying yoga therapy currently.
mm,
Um, and so I love this intersection of breath with body, breath with mental health. Um, that place where all of these things exist together and how we can use, well, each of those things to impact the other,
mhm,
really.
mhm.
And ultimately to live a sweeter life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I met you. Initially, you were offering mm, what was it called? Um, Traumatic stress in the breath with Jane
Oh,
at that
mhm,
time. That's how I came to know you through Jane Clapp. And after taking that course, I
mhm,
was so intrigued, and I had been struggling with my own breathing and trying to make changes on my own that were not working. And so I did some breath retraining through you, which really, really was transformative for me. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But what might be helpful to start with is this sort of idea of the body and the mind as a system, the psyche soma system. You and I came up with a term for this when we were teaching traumatic stress in the breath together. And we called it the murmuration model. So
mhm.
do you want to introduce that a little
Which
bit
I
and talk a
still
little?
love.
I love to. I love
Well,
to.
yeah, it's so great. So a murmuration, of course, is a flock. It's usually starlings that we talk
Mhm,
about murmuration with, where,
mhm,
in the evening when they're settling and they're trying to figure out where they're going to roost for the night, and they move through the sky as one.
mhm.
Um, it's so beautiful. You should post a link to this below
I will. I definitely
to a
will.
great murmur.
Yeah.
Okay, so people can get a sense. If you've never witnessed it, it was last fall. I was driving to a class in the evening, and there was a flock of it. They went right over the road I was driving on, and I almost followed them. I was like, I want to go watch. Um, I didn't. I kept going, but it was such a beautiful thing. And so this idea of a person, a being
Mhm,
as a murmuration.
mhm,
So, as a series of parts that together move, um, as we go through our lives, and how some of the birds are representing the body,
mhm,
some are representing the psyche, soma and psyche,
mhm,
some are representing the breath. And some are representing, we had body, thoughts, and
mhm.
emotions. Is that
Yeah.
right? Do you remember the
Affect.
words exactly that we used?
Hmm.
Affect.
Affect, attention, and I forget the third right now.
Yeah, we need to go
Yeah.
back over that. Um, yeah, and how any one of those three can pull the beautiful movement that's happening together in synchronicity out of that.
Yeah.
And how we can try to bring it all back together by working with any one of those three.
Yeah. So we have, instead of thinking about the body as a machine in that sort of left hemisphere way of thinking, we're seeing the body as this organic system where all of the parts are just moving together. And if one part says, hey, I think there's something to be worried about, there's some danger, then the rest of the flock, the rest of the system starts to move with it. And so, in order to enact change, well, let's talk about what happens when we get stuck. So,
Mhm.
in the sense of maybe I've had some traumatic event happen to me, maybe I have some childhood trauma, and so the flock is really only flying in one direction, and there's not a lot of pliability to the system. What does that look like? Because you see this in your work.
Oh, yeah, you see this too.
Mm,
Yeah, so you see a person who um, they have um, thought patterns that move in a certain way. They
mm,
get stuck in that way. They can't be responsive to the situations around them. Their breathing, which is, of course, where I tend to notice right away, they tend to have very stuck breathing, usually upper thoracic,
mm,
this kind of breathing,
mm,
um, lots of breath holding, inhale, hold,
mhm, mhm.
often
Mouth
mouth
breathing?
breathing. Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Um, yeah. Eyes looking forward,
Very focused. Yeah.
very focused.
And so the idea with the murmuration model then is that if we can pick out one piece of the flock, one piece of the system that feels safe enough to start to work with, and introduce a new pattern, then maybe we can get the rest of the birds to start to fly with it. The thoughts change, the physiology starts to shift. Maybe some of those systems that have been stuck in that fight or flight kind of like my digestion doesn't work quite right, or my reproductive organs aren't, system isn't doing what it should. Then, if we can
Mhm.
maybe make one change, everything else starts to shift. And
Mhm.
we're going to look at
Mhm.
a case study in a little bit that I'm pretty excited for you all to see because this is one of Jennifer's clients that's really been positively impacted in this way. Do you feel like that encapsulates sort of this idea of the body as a system and the mind as a system?
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I have people come in to see me and they've been to all of these other practitioners, and of course not to say that other physical modalities and other things aren't really useful, helpful. They certainly are,
Yeah.
but a person who's stuck in that kind of way does not need to be beginning necessarily by correcting a mechanical thing in their body. Like
Mhm.
we need to, right? I just had a person here this morning who has all of this pain, and she's like, but my physiotherapist says I should be doing rowing. And I was like, okay, but
So let's
before that,
give them this really complicated task before they've adjusted their sense of feeling safe in their body and their ability to breathe in a more optimal way. That's a disaster waiting
yeah,
to happen. I mean, in a worst case
yeah,
scenario, but I can imagine what the
yeah,
rowing's going to look like. Not great.
not great.
Hmm.
And people who they're coming in very high pain places, 7, 8, 9,
Mm.
and are being told by other people, well, you need to be doing these exercises. And
Yeah.
it's not, I'm sure those exercises at some point would be really, really helpful for them. Yes, they have imbalances, they have weakness, all of that. Absolutely. Rowing is a great exercise. I love rowing.
Yeah.
Um, but that isn't necessarily the place where we can start with everyone. And so starting with something that's much simpler than that
Mm.
can really make big changes. Yeah.
It's interesting too, and I realize that Jennifer and I right now are sort of talking around some things. We're going to drill down, to use a horrible phrase. We're going to get down to some sort of how to and some basic information. Yeah, we're just circling, we're circumambulating. But I want to just drop in here something that came up for me is I'm thinking about a client I know who's been going to physical therapy, and this is somebody I have permission to speak about, as I know you do about your clients, and they're all anonymous. Um,
Mhm.
but I'm thinking about how this client, when she goes to physical therapy and her nervous system is really activated because of some other things that are going on in her life. You just can't do this kind of really technical work at that point. The system is like running another program, computer language,
Mhm.
but it's not safe enough to start to make big changes. So if we're
Mhm.
going to start to enact a change, it needs to be with something that's safe enough, mild enough, um, and we're not taking away the other sort of safety blankets that they have. We're just we're just saying to the bird, look over here. What if we were, what if we were to fly in that direction? And letting it be
Yeah.
okay before we start to do big changes. Because the other
Yeah.
stuff, and I know you've seen this, it's just not going to stick. Nothing will work. If we're in this fight or flight, if we're in a kind of a panic about stuff, you can't learn in that state. Nothing's going to change.
No. And you can't say to somebody, don't do that.
Like when I went to the dental hygienist and she squirted cold water on a very sensitive tooth, and I jerked back and she said, don't do that. Okay. If I had any control at all, don't you think I would have not? Yeah. Some things literally we're dealing with involuntary systems with these folks.
Right. Involuntary systems and patterns that are the only way that they know how to be in.
Mm,
If you tell somebody, and I'm thinking of breathing because I do,
yeah, let's
don't
get into
breathe
it.
that way. Don't breathe
Mhm.
that way. Well, then how do I breathe?
Ooh, and how does that feel? Like existentially horrible. I don't know how to
Like
breathe
I,
any other way.
I need to breathe, but
Mhm.
I can't. And you're saying I can't breathe that way. Well, that's pretty scary.
I'm thinking about the number of people that I've had tell me how difficult they find it when someone says, just take a deep breath because they
Mm,
can't. And they would love to be able to, and they can't. And then that creates a secondary level of anxiety around, oh my God, now I can't even take a deep breath,
right.
which is why
Well,
that's a
what's that?
cue we don't use, you and I.
No. What does it mean to take a deep breath?
Mm.
Like if I were to, yeah, right?
It's a neck breath. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's in your neck, it's in your shoulders. There's a lot of tension. There's often
yeah, yeah.
like the kind of breath that you might take in when you're anticipating pain or
Like a
fear or,
bracing.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So let's just look at we touched on some of those patterns already, but let's run through some of the less optimal patterns and talk about why they're not evil, bad, or wrong, and why
Mhm.
people why we're supposed to breathe in different ways at different times. Because I think this is like a huge piece.
Well, okay. First of all, there is no perfect way to breathe.
Mm,
There are better ways to breathe at different times
yeah.
for different people, depending on what's
Hmm.
going on. Um, there is nothing is inherently evil about any breathing pattern.
Mm,
Um, but some breathing patterns are associated with stress,
mm,
um, being in a stress state. And that might be stress in this moment. That might be stress that the
mm,
psyche has made present in
hmm
this moment from another
hmm
time or place.
And it could be the future. I'm
Could
worried
be the
about.
future.
Hmm
Yep. And it could be
hmm
something made up
Oh
that
yeah.
isn't, that hasn't happened, that probably won't happen, but that
Still feels real.
our minds make it real.
Yeah.
Um, and those stress patterns can become habit. And the problem is when the stress pattern becomes the only way you can breathe,
Mm,
then you're breathing that way all the time. And the breathing pattern invokes stress.
mm. So I'm breathing as though something is wrong because I think something is wrong. And then because even when things are okay, I continue to breathe in that way. It's sending a message to my psyche, to my brain, like something's wrong. We should be alarmed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a
And so,
self-enforcing, reinforcing kind of loop.
yeah, exactly. And so if we can interrupt and
Mm-hmm.
we can do some inhibition
Mm-hmm.
and some interruption of those patterns, we can then start to introduce new patterns
Mm.
and sort of break out of that cycle.
So let's just touch briefly on some things that people might see in themselves or others. If you are somebody who works with other humans and you're curious, like, okay, what does stress breathing look like? And you touched on this already, but let's just make it really explicit. Can you show or say what they might be
Okay.
seeing in that person?
A lot of breathing through the mouth.
Hmm.
And I know there's some people out there who say you should never breathe through your mouth. And I'm not going to say that. But when you see a person who breathes like this and they're constantly breathing in and
Mm,
in fact, you know what? Change my sound here. They're breathing like this and and you can hear them sucking in
yeah,
air. We
so
start to
stressful.
feel along with
Hmm.
them.
Yeah,
Let's get rid of that sound. So
I got
there's that
tense.
sort of mouth breathing. Yeah, I know, right? Okay,
Hmm.
so we'll just take, I'll take a moment. So there's that mouth breathing that happens. Also, breathing in the upper chest, and the mouth and the upper chest are often associated,
Mm,
right? If you breathe through your nose, it's a little bit harder. It requires bigger muscles. We end up breathing a little bit lower in the body when we're breathing through our nose. So that's
mm,
good. That's
hmm.
helpful.
Hmm.
Um, some people will say, I can't breathe through my nose. And I have all kinds of tools and tricks and things that we can do to help people breathe through their nose. I'll just say right now, if you're somebody watching and you say, I can't breathe through my nose, if you can sit quietly for 3 minutes and breathe through your nose, you just need to work on some breathing patterns and to make that more available to you more of the time.
Even
You
if you
might
have a
not need
deviated
surgery.
septum.
Deviated septum, polyps, all of those things that people say, I must have surgery to be able to breathe through my nose. If you can sit for 3 minutes and breathe through your nose, you probably don't need surgery.
Mm,
Okay.
all
So
right.
just something to consider. If you're one of those people, there's still hope. You
Yeah.
can learn some things that are really helpful. So, yeah, if we
Okay.
can just start by breathing through the nose, that's a great
Mm.
place to begin.
I think that's a really important point. And I want to really get to that about, I want to make sure that we have a complete, I want to finish up this other thought about what we might be seeing in front of us. Can you show posturally what you might be seeing with people?
Right. Yeah.
Next.
So you might be seeing this sort of folded in on oneself posture, shoulders rolled
Okay.
forward, and then lots of breathing this way. So there's no
Hmm.
space to breathe in the
Hmm.
body. You might see this sort of posture
Start from the
really,
side. This is the one I talk about so much. Yeah.
yep,
So this is the open scissors breathing. When she inhales, the rib
yep.
cage lifts up. Hmm.
And let me tell you right now, this breathing will hurt your low back.
Hmm.
Right, three
Hmm.
breaths like that, and my back is saying, "What are you doing?"
It's doing so much work. Yeah.
So much work, and there's
Hmm.
so much compression as the front of the rib cage lifts and the back arches to try to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's sort of two. You can see the really shut down or the really hyper vigilant
Mm. What
place.
about the muscles of the neck?
Mm.
Sternocleidomastoid.
Right. If you see people, often people who have really big necks, because they've been using those. So you breathe 20 to 30,000 times a day,
Hmm.
right? So if every time you took a breath, you had to use the little muscles in your neck to lift your rib cage up, those muscles would get very strong and
Hmm.
very big. And so
Hmm.
often people with big neck are people who are using those muscles for breathing. Not always, but
Yeah.
sometimes. So you'll see people with overdeveloped muscles in their neck. They may be up here because they're doing this
Hmm.
kind of breathing, or they're just
Hmm.
holding up. I'm
Hmm.
over exaggerating it, of course. A lot of tension in the neck.
Mm. Always,
Yeah.
always doing this guy, trying to get there.
Hmm.
It's very
Trying to get
relatable.
that. Well, we're all, on our devices in this head thrust place. Um, you should
Yeah.
have my glasses on as I'm looking at things, even reading books or
Yeah.
knitting. Um,
And the world we live in is stressful. Like
it
it's
is.
not wrong that you have stress, y'all. Like that's normal. And
And
it's,
it's pretty rough right now.
yeah. So it's
And if you're
normal to have,
feeling stressed, we're
yeah.
with you.
Yes. Yes.
We
Yeah.
wanted to do this in January, and it's at the end of April.
If that
We
tells
are
you
with you.
anything. So it can be really easy when you're listening to something like this. I'm really aware when I hear something like this, I can feel like, man, I've been breathing wrong. I got to get my shit together and fix it. And that's not at all what Jennifer's saying. It's not at all what we're saying. It is normal to have a breathing pattern that goes with your mental state. And if you're not always in that mental state, we should at some point, even if things are really stressful, we should be able to have moments where we feel a little safer and a little better. And then we want the breath to be able to be malleable enough that our flock of birds can shift and change.
And ultimately, it can be really useful. Um, Not always
Mm,
possible, but sometimes when you become really practiced at new breathing patterns and they become
mm,
familiar and more comfortable, to in moments when you're in a lot of stress, think, you know what, if I breathe through my nose,
mm,
I'm not going to get rid of any of this stressful situation, but I might become a little bit more calm, and
mm,
then managing it might feel a little bit easier.
mm. Such a key point because breathing is the only part of our autonomic nervous system that we have any control over. Is that right? Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, okay, let's do this again.
Okay.
So, breathing patterns.
Hmm.
Although we shouldn't be controlling our breathing pattern from moment to moment,
Yeah.
there should be flexibility and responsiveness in our breathing.
Mm,
If we're in a stressful moment and we notice that we're less overwhelming, if we can shift that breathing pattern a bit. If we notice that we're holding our breath,
mm,
so if you've been like holding your breath, if you can just start to let the breathing be in a more natural rhythm, maybe with a slight pause after your exhale, two
mm,
seconds, and
mm,
then let the inhale come again. Pause, 2 seconds. That
mm,
sort of there's little tricks that we can use that can help shift the breathing back, and
mm,
then that can actually start to lead the rest of the flock
mhm.
in a new pattern. And like I've said, we can't change the world around us and what's
Yeah.
happening, but we can have some measure of influence over how we are reacting and responding to that situation.
Mm. So let me just recap what I heard you say. We want to first make sure that we're not trying to change anyone's breathing patterns until we have introduced the ability to shift that breathing pattern in the first place. So we're not just saying breathe differently because that doesn't work. Once we've got the ability to say nose breathe comfortably, or to introduce that pause, then in moments of stress, we could start to bring this in as a tool to use at that point because it's like telling our nervous system, hey, right now we're okay. And here's a little reminder that we're okay. And then that can sort of
Mhm.
start to downshift things a little bit. Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Let's just touch briefly on, we've talked about nose breathing, but can you just say a few things about why nose breathing is so important? But this is something I'm often questioned on. And the exhale too through the nose is
Yeah.
important.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always inhale through my nose, but I exhale through my mouth.
Hmm.
Okay. So inhaling through your nose, first of all, your nose is going to filter out dust, pollen, viruses and bacteria,
Mm.
all the stuff that's in the air that we don't want in our lungs. Your nose is built to capture that, filter it out, kill it.
Hmm.
Right? The nose is great for that. The nose also prepares the air that's coming into your lungs by warming it or cooling it, depending on where you are and
Hmm.
when you're there. And also humidifies the air because
Hmm.
the air that's in our lungs needs to be quite humidified.
Hmm.
I won't
Were
use
you
that
trying
M
not to
word.
say moist? Because the word moist is
Yes.
gross. Keep going. Yeah.
So now that you've said it, we might as well say it. So we
Moist.
want the air to be moist. Moist. Okay. So that's why we breathe in through our nose. There's also a chemical element to
Yeah.
this. We make nitric oxide in our paranasal sinuses, and we want to breathe that into our lungs.
Hmm.
So you're breathing through your mouth, you're missing out on all that.
Yeah.
Breathing out through the nose, breathing out
Mm.
through the nose, we also are able to retain moisture.
Mm.
Um, so you lose less water, right? So
Mm.
you know how, like when you talk all day, you're more thirsty than if you don't talk all day?
I do.
Yeah. So, yeah. And part of that is just that you're blowing out water from your
Hmm.
lungs. And so you have to make more for your lungs. And so you need a drink. Um, yeah. So if you're breathing out through your nose, I mean, when you're talking, there's nothing you can do about it. That's fine. We need to talk. We're humans. It's how we communicate. So it's fine.
Hmm.
One of the
Hmm.
secondary functions of breathing is speaking.
Yeah.
Um, but the rest of the time, we should be breathing out through our nose, even when we're exercising.
Mm.
And when not, so our nose helps us retain moisture, but also helps us retain better levels of carbon dioxide. And
Hmm.
there's a really interesting but slightly complicated thing about how carbon dioxide is needed.
Yeah.
I won't get into all the chemistry, but we do need enough carbon dioxide. So it's not just something we can just blow away.
Yeah. Because if I remember correctly, Jennifer, if we don't have enough carbon dioxide in our tissues, we're not getting enough oxygen to our muscles. Is that true?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So people who say, like, I
And
feel like I
carbon
just can't go ahead.
I just can't if I need to I need to breathe more because I don't have enough oxygen.
Yeah, it's what we hear.
You have enough oxygen. And the thing you can do is take your very fancy watch or get yourself a pulse oximeter
Very cheap.
and check. These are $20 or something. You can check your oxygen levels. And unless it's below 92,
You've got
you
plenty.
really don't need to. You've got plenty. In fact, take lots of big breaths and watch what
Hmm.
happens to your oxygen because it cannot get much higher. And if it's 98 and 99, how do you
Hmm.
get more oxygen into your blood? That's
Hmm.
100%. It's 99% blood oxygen saturation. There's no more room. So
Hmm.
breathing more isn't getting more oxygen into your body.
In fact, overbreathing is the more
Mhm.
common problem. Many of us are
Right.
hyperventilating.
And then
Yeah.
we see carbon dioxide levels drop.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. It's one of the ways we can have dysfunctional breathing.
So if I want to ask you this, and then I want to make sure we have time for Jerry, and we're going to wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure we have time for Jimmy, and then we're going to wrap up. Um, can you just make a recommendation or two if I am somebody who sees people in my office, or I'm somebody who works with people, and I'm seeing some of the patterns you're saying, what would be one or two things I might want to recommend or suggest for that person? Or how could I help them with their breathing if I feel like it's a cause causing some problems for them?
Model healthy breathing to them.
Ah, brilliant. Mm-hmm.
So we tend to breathe the way we see the other person breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm breathing through my nose and
Mm,
taking pauses at the end of
mm,
sentences with my
mm,
mouth closed
mm.
and with my shoulders relaxed, somebody else is going to start to breathe that way more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
starting
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Um, and you might ask, how does your breathing feel?
Mm,
You might suggest, I see that you're breathing through your mouth. How does that feel?
mm. Just bring a little awareness to it and see if there's a shift.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
How would it feel to breathe through your nose?
Mm,
Some people might switch and go, oh, that feels so much better. Somebody else might say, that feels really scary to me. I
mm,
feel like that's not
mm.
possible for me, and I don't want to do that. So forcing them to do it in that moment probably won't
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think if we can start to bring awareness to gentle awareness to some breathing patterns, and then start to suggest breathing in different ways, that can be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to just highlight that there are not a lot of people doing the work that Jennifer's doing. There's nobody doing exactly what she's doing at the intersection of where she's doing it. And she offers a lot of accessible ways to work with her. So if you're wanting more, we'll make sure that we've linked her information. Um,
Thanks.
yeah, of course. And I feel so lucky to have worked with you. I think if we can we just touch on the story of Jimmy a little bit and some of how just working with this breathing has given him
Mhm.
some change in other areas?
Yeah. So briefly, so Jimmy is a guy who was a police officer for many years,
Mm-hmm.
has a trauma history, as well as a lot of physical injuries from his time on the job, and
Mm-hmm.
has been in chronic pain for 20 years and more than 20 years. And came to me almost a year ago now to was recommended by an osteopath. His physiotherapist sent him to an osteopath because he wasn't breathing well. And his osteopath said, I can't, you need to go see her. So he came to see me, which was very,
Wow.
very nice. Um, and so we did start working with some breathing patterns. It was very upper thoracic. It was very frozen. It was um, a lot of big sighing, a lot of breathing through the mouth. And so by doing exactly some of the things that we've talked about today, gentle awareness, breathing lower in the body, working on nose breathing,
Mm,
we were able to start getting into some of the physical stuff that was holding him in some of those patterns. And
mm,
then there was pain associated with those patterns that also started to sort of unravel.
mm,
And so some of this chronic pain started
mm.
to go. I mean, when he comes to see me now, he leaves and his pain level's at a zero.
Wow. 20
And
years of
it
pain.
all 20 years of pain.
Mm,
Yeah. And he's, for years seen multiple practitioners, like sometimes 2 appointments a day, massage, physio, osteo, his pain doctor, the list of meds. And I'm
mm.
not magic, just, but
Well, you're a little magic.
it's been really, well, thank you. Um, but it's been really rewarding
Mm.
seeing how these small changes actually have a ripple effect that goes out from the breath into the body and then into the mind as well. Yeah.
It's stunning. And I've shared some practices before. You know how much I love the hemi bridge. But sometimes just giving our systems a chance to settle enough that the breathing can change. It can unlock
Mhm.
so many like my back doesn't hurt anymore, and oh my gosh, my digestion just start turned on. Like, finally, I can go
Oh,
to the
yeah.
bathroom. Thank God. Like these
Excuse me, I'll be right
things.
back.
Oh yeah, that happens, doesn't it? And we're glad
Hmm.
when it does, because that's really exciting. If I hear
Absolutely.
somebody's stomach
Yeah.
start to grumble, like fantastic. Let's just touch briefly,
Mhm.
Jennifer, on some of the MUPS, medically unexplained problems, and how breathing is
Mm.
related. So I think that's sort of a nice note for people just to be aware of.
Yeah. So there's yeah, medically unexplained physical symptoms.
Mm,
And yeah, so for those of you who've been going to the doctor for years and have some symptom,
mm,
um, it might be discomfort in your back, it might be uh, digestion, it could be nervous system stuff, it could be twitches, it could have to do with your sleep, it could,
yeah.
and often one place and then it somewhere else and shows up somewhere else and you end up like having seen all of these people and you there's nothing wrong with you.
Hmm.
Yeah, it might be associated at the heart with your breathing patterns. And the breathing patterns live in these three areas in the biochemistry, in the
Mm,
biomechanical, and in the
mm,
psychophysiological. And so it could
mm.
be happening in any of or more than one of those areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that you tied it back in with that. It's it's astonishing to me how something so simple can affect so much. And it's also, and I'm sure you share this, Jennifer, a source of great frustration when I see somebody seeing six different doctors and so many different practitioners. And, not to minimize any of that work, it's also important. And yet, if we could just address this one piece, so many things start to shift and fall into place. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, go ahead, Jen. What are you going to say?
I was just gonna say it's this bridge. The breath is this bridge between the body
Yeah,
and mind. And it's just central, I mean, physically central in our body, but also
literally.
central, literally central, but also metaphorically central
Mm,
to everything that we do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I am always touting the benefits of working with Jennifer, and we'll share her information at the end. Um, and she does lots of webinars. She doesn't have anything scheduled right now, but if there's something you're curious about, would like more information on, drop a note, drop a comment, or send a message to her, to me, and let's see if there's something we might need to share in the future too.
Yeah, I think we should do something together again sometime soon.
Definitely. So it's always so much fun. I just love spending time together anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Any last thoughts? Anything we want to kind of leave people with?
I know it's a really hard time right now.
Mm.
Um, it's not you, it's the world.
Yeah.
And just yeah, take care of yourself. And
Yeah.
if you just do what you can do and don't worry about the rest. It's all we can do
Mm,
right now.
yeah. Any breathing is good breathing, and we're so glad you're breathing.
Yes. Keep breathing.
Yeah. And maybe give nose breathing a try if you're not already.
Yeah. And oh, let's do it. Let's do a nose clearing. Here we go.
Okay, great.
If you
So,
feel right now like you can't breathe through your nose,
mhm.
this is the first trick that I teach. You're going to take a gentle inhale and a gentle exhale. At the end of your exhale, you're going to plug your nose and you're going to nod your head. So we'll do it together.
Okay, I'm ready.
And then when it's time to breathe, when you're ready, just let the breath come in. That's
Mm,
not mine. That comes from Buteyko breathing practices. But it's just a quick trick and it can be really effective. You can do it as many times as you need to. Maybe you do it once and you feel a little bit of a change. Take a couple of
mm.
breaths and do it again. Yeah.
I always thought I was a person who couldn't breathe through my nose at certain points. And working with Jennifer showed me that that wasn't true. I just needed to work up to it. And she gave me the safe ways to do that, that let it be comfortable. So, I'm not perfect, but I now exercise only nose breathing, which I didn't think was possible. when I turn face down for a massage, I can nose breathe. And that was previously unavailable to me. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. And the shifts that happened for me physiologically and mentally afterward were tremendous. So really grateful.
Good.
Hmm.
I'm so glad.
All
Nice
right.
to see you, Laura.
Nice to see you, Jennifer, and everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. And I'll see you all again soon. Leave a comment and let us know what you're thinking about and anything else that's on your mind. All right. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.